still.
Yeah.
Maybe if you stand in front. No, that's still
No,
pretty
that's
bad.
worse. Okay,
Yeah.
wait, what if I stand on something? Wait, I got this. I'm not gonna stand on it. I'm just gonna slightly better. Come on. Let's see if I can stay kneeling the entire
I
time.
feel like it's almost exactly the same. I think I could just slouch a little bit and it'll be
No,
fine.
it's definitely better like this. Okay, great. Welcome to Relationships with Height Differentials.
Power Dynamics 101 with Geof Krum and Sara Ness.
The container is now open. I love saying that. The Eros Series continues with this very exciting and special episode of The Container. Today we are talking to none other than Sara Ness and Geof Krum, who, if you don't already know, are two highly influential leaders in the authentic relating movement. And they're also in a relationship. They're married to each other. They talk to us about their backgrounds and what it's like to use these well-honed skills of authenticity in their own relationship. We end up focusing on healthy conflict and how fighting better can lead to loving more. Next week, we talk about red hot anger and how it can be used to build stronger relationships. I was a skeptic at first, but you'll have to watch the episode next week to see how I might have been convinced to the other side. We'll see. At authorep.com, you can find so many courses that are led and created by Sara, Geof, and their entire team. Jonathan and I are actually taking the Authentic Facilitator course as we speak. It is so good. Shout out to Jason, Kale, and the cohort. Now, here's the first half of our interview with Sara and Geof.
Sara Ness and Geof Krum. It's interesting talking to you guys because we're both in the middle of the Authentic Facilitator course on Authentic Revolution. So I've been seeing you guys for weeks now. And y'all haven't been talking to us, but I've been hearing y'all talk and seeing you guys. So it's nice to finally get to talk to you here.
Yeah, it's funny watching the videos and also, Sara, we've communicated a little in Messenger, so I feel like we have a little bit of something like of knowing each other, but it's really nice to have you. I feel incredibly grateful that you're here for this part of our show, and I'm a little bit nervous. I'm like nervous, kind of like fangirl excited, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, our community has benefited so much from the games manual that you created, and yeah, and the resources that we've gotten from both of you on YouTube and your writings and kind of the institutions you guys have built. So that's all to say that for many people in authentic relating and circling, y'all probably need no introduction, but I'm wondering if we could start with you guys each saying a little bit about your path in the movement and in awakening, and yeah, how did you get here?
You want to go first? Do you want me to?
I'd prefer you to go first.
Me? Wow. Well, I'll say that, and I'll say a little bit of how it relates to the us. I got into authentic relating when I was living in the housing co-ops, and I got really curious about how people lived together and how they addressed the conflicts that were inevitably coming up all the time. And I took a year off of college between my junior and senior year, and I wanted to research how people lived together after the college co-ops. Like, where did they go if they wanted to co-live? And it ended up with me traveling around the US for 2 months, filming a whole bunch of cooperatives and co-housing and communes. And I ended up writing a thesis, Building Utopia, about it. never actually finishing the documentary. But on that route, I met somebody that had been to the Integral Center in Boulder and done the Authentic Man program and had this little manual of authentic relating games. And he wanted to lead them for the ecstatic dance community in Houston, which is actually where I'd met him. It's like my first experience of embodiment was being taken to ecstatic dance by one of these co-ops we were filming. And we started leading games for the ecstatic dance community. And then when I went back for my senior year in college, I brought the games to the co-ops and started leading them there. And I was thinking about this the other day. It wasn't even necessarily the experience of playing the games that was the most powerful part of that. Like, that was amazing. But it was the facilitator community that came together around it. There was like 4 of us and then 6 of us who would just get together, play the games, discuss facilitation issues, talk about games plans, how we wanted to create it. And there was something about that co-creation mixed with authentic relating that was so powerful. Like, authentic relating is such a cool practice, but I think it's even cooler when it's combined with like an outcome, a doing. Like, we are working towards something together and we're using the games as a way to deepen our connection on the way. And then only a couple years after I started the community, I met Geof at a circus meetup, and he very quickly started coming to the games. And then, given who he is as a person, he started leading them with me and leading courses with me and doing the photography and the videography and a lot of the skilled work with them. And authentic relating, I think, has really been a powerful part of our relationship in general, but especially learning how to speak together from very different languages. Like, Geof hasn't had a very different communication style, and it really opened my eyes around using authentic relating tools to understand different communication styles instead of asking that everybody come over to doing AR. So that's some of my journey. You want to talk words?
Word talk, good. I'm just kind of composing. I don't think I've ever said this out loud, and certainly not in an interview before. I've definitely said this before. I need to silence my phone.
Wow.
And I think that I was introduced to authentic relating when I was 17 years old in rehab. Stick with me.
Oh yeah.
I was in rehab for a reason, right? I was currently as a part of the justice system as a juvenile delinquent. And I was introduced to listening circles as part of my rehabilitation practice, which was intended as group and peer support. And I had never experienced a place in my life before where we were encouraged to be as vulnerable as humanly possible about our experiences and the challenges that we were facing with the justice system, our home lives, and our journeys with chemical and relational bonding. And as I reflect on it, it really changed my life forever. It wasn't until years later that I was in positions of supervisory capacity and responsibility that I started incorporating some of those elements into otherwise toxic work environments, where our meetings would be more listening oriented, less just like in the hospitality industry. It's usually like you get together for a meeting, chef gives marching orders, that's the end of it. Working as a chef, it was more like, what's everybody's experience today? What's everybody bringing into the kitchen today? How do we feel about service? Is there anything that we're feeling, anxious about? Anything that we want to change? And that began sculpting a leadership pattern that became very unique to me, especially in the industries I continued to operate in the hospitality industry, the event production industry, and then later in the manufacturing and sales industries. And as I was crafting this kind of unique to me leadership style that I didn't have there was nowhere to pull this from that existed, 15 years ago. So as I was crafting that thing, I felt kind of like alone, but it was working. And so I was kind of stumbling forward in the dark. And when I moved to Austin, Texas in 2014, 2 weeks later at a random circus event that was a 15-minute walk from my house, I ran into Sara Ness while I was meeting for the first time with the organizers. And she invited me to start coming to Authentic Relating Games, which I promptly did. And we were collaborating with each other in Authentic Relating Games and building coursework for entrepreneurs and creators within 3 months of me first being introduced to authentic relating.
Mhm.
About a year later, we kind of separated paths and didn't see each other for about 3 years. In the meantime, I became rooted in high risk manufacturing environments and working as a leader and then eventually a plant manager inside of those environments. But along the way, I was responsible for reorganizing leadership structures and redesigning trainings and safety programs. And in redesigning the trainings and the leadership programs, I was able to incorporate aspects of authentic relating and circling and what I would say like social health initiatives into the way that we operated, really centering human connection as a part of our design for excellence and productivity and quality. And it had some really fantastic outcomes. And when I found myself in burnout, I ran into Sara again. And I took a really hard look at all the things that I'd done professionally and realized the thing that I was most excited about was taking everything that had been really hard-won knowledge and helping people to do better with more methods and deployable practices and effective models and modalities. So we began designing the Authentic Facilitator, which is, well, it was the foundations of facilitation when we first designed it, but what became the Authentic Facilitator, which is the course you two are currently enrolled in. And then it kind of went from there. Now, a lot of the work that we're doing is focusing specifically on conflict, which I'm having a really wonderful time with. But something Sara highlighted that I feel deeply about is, while authentic relating games and circling practices are fun and useful, they're fantastic ways to build and deepen into new skills and practice them in containers that are designed to do that thing. I get really excited about where we can apply them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good bio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get really excited about that too. I love that you ended on that. It's like, yes, where we can apply them. I find myself often like, okay, I'm in this teaching world. I teach children, I work with these adults, like taking this course, is a huge step in a direction for me in my career of figuring out how can I integrate all of these things together and, and see it and spread it out into the world instead of just hosting games at my house or, at the library or whatever.
Yeah.
So I really resonated with that.
Yeah, it reminds me of something. I'm sure a lot of communities say this, but we always talk about being in practice, but then it's like, what are we practicing for?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, there's like, both of y'all have backgrounds in like rooted in community building or in, industrial production, things where there are big stakes on the line. And it's important that people are able to show up authentically. And like that might start, that process might start in a much lower stakes situation where you're just going to a games night because you were handed a flyer or saw the thing on Facebook. But it's like, yeah, these things stack up and can be so momentous.
It's actually the thing I really love about the games specifically. Like, I get asked sometimes, why did I choose games over circling? And I like the games because they're more versatile. It's like you can take empathy game and you can teach it to kids. You can do it in different scenarios. You can do it in a workplace. You can use it for conflict mediation. It's basically just applied NVC. You can do the curiosity game and you can use it on dates. You can use it in job interviews. So it's like the games are meant to be building blocks to deeper connection. And I think oftentimes we look at them as like, these are a house in and of themselves. And I really don't think that's how they're meant.
I completely agree. Completely agree.
Yeah. Like, even in developing, like we're polyamorous and we have a girlfriend, and in developing that relationship, a lot of using the skill of speaking the elephant in the room and having relational conversations has been invaluable. Even like on a walk the other day, we played Mirror of Perception, which is a game where you name qualities that you see in someone else, and they give a 1 to 5 of how much they see that quality in themselves. And then they do the same thing. They're like, oh, I'm intellectual. And you give a 1 to 5 of how much you think that of them. And it's like this whole beautiful, like, how do you see me reflection, and really fun to play with more than 2 people because you get these different perspectives. Like, why are those numbers different? So we'll like pop games into lots of different places in our life to enhance them.
And we also see the muscles that we've built in playing those games. We call them playing those games, but it's more like working out than playing games sometimes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we see
myself using the sentence stems constantly. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
it's okay.
Yeah. Where do you guys use them? Like not even the games, but also the skills. Like where do you apply them in your lives?
Oh my gosh.
Man.
Whew.
It's interesting because when I think of authentic relating, it zooms out to these like really important principles of how I want to show up. And and I noticed that that like there are a few games that have stuck around that are like, this gets me to how I want to show up almost every time. Like this gets the goods almost every time. Like for me, just noting game almost always makes me like, whoa, come back here. Let's get back here. Let's like chill out and let's get in the zone and sort of like, come back to presence better than meditating. Like I can, and I can do it while driving. It's like, and like the noticing game is similar. There's,
I use it with my students, with my children. I love that I can now my children are starting to use the language of authentic relating and from games like empathy, like you said, or my 4-year-old the other day was like, Mommy, I have a story that you're not feeling very good right now. Like just like hearing it reflected back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's woven into community meetings that aren't about practice, that are about like the community. We have tried to incorporate the games into, certainly in friendships. Like I have a close friend, and we always start out with some sort of dyad game whenever we get together. So yeah, it's kind of woven its way into everything. And then Jonathan and I play games.
Yeah.
A lot. We did a lot like last year. We haven't done it as much more recently.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's true in my experience.
Yeah.
There's like a way that it like you were saying it's kind of, they're like working out, and as you get stronger, bigger muscles, you're like able to in some cases kind of remain in practice without the structure of the game. It's like your consciousness kind of takes that shape a little bit more.
We use it as kind of frame breaks also. Like say we're getting into a mode of talking too much about work or giving too much advice. Sometimes we'll just be like, let's like do curiosity stuff for a little, where we're just asking questions.
Okay, so this is exciting because this is the Eros series. We want to focus on relationships, and I think it's interesting.
Sorry, just blocking out sound. Our housemate is the loudest spoon clinker in the West.
That's tinnitus, and he's
Oh, I didn't mean
5 years
Kim. I
old.
meant Chris.
Oh, it's Kim.
Oh, never mind.
Me.
I appreciate you caretaking the audio. That's helpful. In this Eros series of episodes, and wanting to focus on how this stuff can help us live a more spirit forward, conscious, mindful, erotic life. It's interesting to me to have two facilitators and like people who have been at the forefront of this movement in a relationship, and you talking about like, we use it as a brain break, and I'm imagining like, oh yeah, I bet a lot of their relationship benefits from that facilitator approach, and wanting to get a peek into how does that background show up?
A big way is when we fight.
Yeah.
So what was going through your brain?
Coming through my brain.
There's something, and I'll give my thought and you can give yours. The way I see the facilitation brain showing up in that is like when you're a facilitator, you get really good at seeing multiple perspectives at the same time and stopping in the middle of something and being able to pop out of it. It's like I have really strong emotions, but I've learned to take perspective on them. Because like, say you're doing an exercise and you're facilitating it and you're doing a demo and you get really deep into the emotion, you still have to lead after that. So you have to be able to hold both of those perspectives. You have to like be in yourself and of yourself at the same time. And so when we're fighting, Geof has really helped me be more expressive in fighting. I used to be very AR. I would want to slow everything down. I would want to do empathy. I would want to do a lot of curiosity. It drove him crazy. Conflicts went so slowly. And so Geof taught me to just like say the thing. And so we'll be like pretty expressed with each other because we know that we have the ability at some point to stop and go, wait a second, I just heard you say something different. I didn't have that information. Go back to that. And then we start brainstorming, well, what do we do from here? Like what factors caused this situation? What happened in the environment? What would we do differently next time? So there's also like a application focus. And it just means that like, I think a lot of couples have arguments that recur again and again and again. And we just don't have as many of them, I think, because we really fully express the issues and then we figure out what needs to change in the environment for them not to happen as often. There are some sticking points for sure. Like poly was a sticking point for a long time that we just couldn't get past, but we finally found a form that works for us.
There was a lot of information that you just introduced.
There was.
The Gottmans say that over 65% of all marital or long-term relationship arguments are recurring. They're never going to have an acute answer to the problem, so they're just going to come up over and over again. From a facilitated approach, something that we look for is patterns, right? We're always looking for patterns. We're very interested in patterns as facilitators. And so I think that Sara and I have a really wonderful and unique way of seeing when we're caught in a pattern and speaking to that thing instead of the content. So this is one thing that I think in being in relationship as two facilitators, it's easy for us to do. And when Sara was talking about having the ability to go from holding disparate perspectives, which is really necessary, to having a meta perspective, we're very good at popping out and doing what crucial learning at least calls speaking from the third story. So speaking from an external perspective, it seems like we are. It seems like every time that I have a story that this thing happens between us. And I want to take a second to talk about how we're approaching this thing as opposed to what we're approaching, because we're going to do this again, right? This is going to happen. Part of any relationship are these recurring issues that you can't solve for. And one of them, like Sara was pointing to, was how can we exist in poly as someone who has been a lifelong person in ENM and polyamorous relationships and someone who has had previously no healthy, there one healthy example of being in an at choice polyamorous or ethical non-monogamous relationship. And so we had to find there are trigger points in here that are core to our identities and our wounds and our traumatic past and our core needs and expectations and desires. How do we engage with this in a productive way that feels helpful and loving? And now we get to design for it because we're geeks and we enjoy doing it. I also think I see just so many aspects of when we were talking earlier about going to the gym. It's not just lifting weights, it's also doing yoga. It's having options. There's so much more flexibility in the way that we can approach problems with the amount of work that we've done to develop both our relational and our communication skills and habits. We're much more at choice. So when we find ourselves in conflict, or we find something missing in our relationship, or we find ourselves within an assumption or a story, we have easy skills to be able to say like, hey, I've got an assumption that, or hey, mom, I have a story that. When your child brought that to you, it just becomes a part of the way that you orient. And it allows us to do things that require a higher level of resilience. Like we let hot anger into our conflicts regularly. Other people might call that thing, well, definitely uncomfortable, but unsafe. It isn't if you have the skills to play with it. Right. And so if you develop as a facilitator, something that I feel deeply is that you have the responsibility to hold your participants at least a level or two deeper than you're intending to take them. Right. So as you develop that capacity to be able to hold intensity, it transposes to the rest of your life and your relationship as you increase your resilience and the options that you have for operating in the context of emotional flooding. So I could speak on this for a long time, but that feels like as concise as I can give right now.
That's beautiful. I'm noticing there's like something that happens in personal practice is like the more you build capacity, I think circling is really good for this. So the more you build capacity to keep with and stay on what is intense, you work through things just almost effortlessly. Just being able to stay with intensity long enough to listen to what's actually going on. It's like you work through your stuff. But at least my journey has meant that working through things leads to deeper and bigger things that require more capacity. It's like in a video game where the enemies keep getting scaled up to your abilities. It's like things aren't getting easier, they're getting harder, but I'm getting better at dealing with them.
Yes.
But and we're getting, hopefully deeper and like more fundamental. And then I'm thinking on like a relationship level, my mind is immediately thinking, oh, you guys are working through this stuff. You must be unlocking deeper and bigger issues than if we're just stuck on these like little ones that are creating little loops of fights that keep recurring, and then that breaks up the relationship. Well, if you work through that, are you finding bigger, deeper healing things?
Yeah.
Like what's that process like?
Yeah.
Is there something you wanted to say first, Sarah, before we?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, we were just talking with a friend the other day about, he was saying, like what about the building of capacity. And so when I hear Geof, when I hear you say, that you allow hot anger into your relationship, I'm like, it feels like a place that I don't go often, or that I'm afraid to go, or that I maybe like I cover up with a story that like, oh, that's just going to be toxic. So I guess that's where I'm curious is like allowing that anger in. Like, to me, it seems like anger is almost like a secondary emotion, like it's going up versus going in. And I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but I'm really curious about how that leads to more wonderfulness or like deeper connection or building capacity. And I imagine, like, I think of like a balloon, like anger, like expanding, and then that increases capacity. But I'm curious what you would say.
Do you want to answer that, and then I can give an example for Jonathan's question?
Yeah. Are you still going to be able to hold Jonathan's question?
Yeah,
Because I can definitely hold.
I was gonna. Let me give an example to Jonathan's first, and then you can respond.
Okay.
My example is not hot anger, so I was like, man, I wish I could
Note
put
take.
those together. But also, a superpower that we use with each other too. We're both long-winded, so this is our signal for like bring it to the moment. Like, I've heard enough. So we might do that to each other at some point when we're talking, but also feel free to do it with us. Might not stop, but it'll tell us we should. An example, so I was thinking about like what was our most recent conflict, and this is like was not a super fiery one, but like, is it okay if I talk about how you've been feeling lately?
Yeah,
in
sure.
relation to work? Okay. So Geof has been having like a lot of self-consciousness about his worth in relation to work. And as we like kind of have explored that further, and so then on my side, that's made me feel really like self-conscious. And even though he's not blaming me, blamed for like, kind of taking up a lot of attention and being successful in our work, of like, oh, I want to like pass off more recognition to you, but I don't know how to. And like, then I feel shame, or like I'm not doing enough, I'm not validating him enough, which is true. I've not been great at doing appreciation historically. So that's something I've needed to work on. And so we've just kind of let that unfold and tried not to fix it. Like, maybe this is a process that has to happen. Geof has kind of been in my shadow for years now, despite the fact that we've been co-creating more and more. Maybe there needs to be a breaking point. So that's one thing, is just like holding the paradox. And then as we've gotten deeper, we've been kind of taking perspective from the outside, like what is causing this dynamic? And so today I came to Geof and I was like, hey, something I noticed is that I have a lot more time to explore my creativity and my business life than you do, because you're handling a lot of the logistics of our life. He's better at it, frankly, but Geof's like handling 2 different homes for us right now, and does all the cooking, and like kind of runs most of the errands. There's a lot of things that I just like don't love to do, and I get to play in my mind. And so I brought up today, okay, like, are there ways we can balance this more? Are there skills I have to learn to be able to take more of those things on? And maybe this will get to the root of the reason why you're feeling self-conscious, because you're just not getting as much time. So there's a lot of like trying different experiments that may help, that may not help. But let's workshop what is maybe leading to these issues. And let's be really proactive in it instead of sinking into it. So that's one that kind of comes up, and it's like deeper and deeper into what are the layers of, well, what does self-consciousness and self-worth even mean? And where does that come from? And how do we kind of work on the roots of that?
And what's my contribution and what's your contribution? Because there's always some level of contribution in a relationship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I will intentionally not expound on that.
Aw.
That I just something about that answer I like is how it shows that a recurring emotion that's creating a little interpersonal upset can be the doorway to this creative project of consciously collaborating on how 2 people or more live together and thrive together. It's funny how often we don't enter those conversations because there's discomfort there.
Right.
But that's actually the sign that like we could recreate something, and like we could thrive on levels we never thought we deserved even, we never even would have asked for it. But so it's like that little grain of discomfort is why it usually gets hidden, but there's this other doorway. So
V1 of this was Geoff feels collapsed and I feel blamed.
Yeah.
I want to make a subtle distinction here that Sara made, but it was subtle enough that I don't think we put enough light on it. So I'm going to give it a little bit more, which is that we have done a lot of practice in being able to sit with discomfort for periods of time. Most people cannot and will not sit with discomfort. They'll do anything that they can to avoid it or remediate against it immediately, as soon as humanly possible. And so something that we practice inside of our communities is non-fixing energy, right? I am not going to solve this problem for you. This is really hard for me all the time. Years of practice, it's still hard for me. And when there's a useful contemplation like this that's uncomfortable, like this is, I referred to this the other day. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just going through a temporary dark night of the soul. This is just something that I have to deal with. It's going to be a few weeks of me, moping around, turned into a month. It's something I have to go through. It's something I have to experience. And we have different ways of processing. I need time on my own to internally process a thing before I bring it to somebody else to externally process. Sara wants to immediately process the raw data with another person to help make sense of it, right? So we also know this about our inherent defaults and what's useful. And I need to sit with that discomfort and really ask, what is it telling me? Why am I even in this? Why am I in this quandary to begin with? What is it leading me to? I really am very interested in, where is this Sherpa leading me? What do I need to see before I dismiss it and enter into a productive, all right, here are things that we can do conversation. And Sara has gotten really good at allowing me the space to do that. And over time, getting, I think, a little bit more resilient to not entering into self-blame cycles, and allowing the productive conversation to come later, allowing that personal exploration to come first, and just allowing there to be space for it, and really helping me make space for it, and making it okay that I'm in a vulnerable place that doesn't feel good, and that's all right. There's a lot of trust that's necessary for that, and there's a lot of building that's necessary for it. So the ability to sit with that discomfort and then permission when you're ready, unless it becomes unhealthy, when you're ready, we can have that part of the conversation. And I think that's really beautiful. So that was really subtle in what you were talking about, but I wanted to bring that thing forward because it feels like one of the primary things that we've worked really hard to develop in our relationship, but also individually.
Yeah, this is the level of the episode of the podcast, amazing, but on a personal relational level, like I'm finding all these connections, Jonathan and I engaging in this project, like, I have children that he's becoming a part of their lives. We're in this romantic relationship, but also wanting to like build, collaborate and build a project. And we have the community, and I just see all these connection points. And I see this kind of like, I really resonate with Geof. And then I kind of see this like, like Jonathan is Sara and I'm Geof. And so I'm like, just seeing it as this mirror that is, I am noticing these like full body, like electric chills as I'm hearing each of you talk. And I'm like, this is important. Like, this is important. So thank you. Yeah. The container is now closed. If you would like to support the work that we do, I hope you do want to support the work that we do. We do a lot of really, really awesome work. You can go to thecontainerpod.com where you can find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can also join us on YouTube where you can like and subscribe to all of our videos. There's tons. And you can find us on all of the social media. We are posting every day. We have all kinds of cool content for you to see and enjoy and comment on and engage with. You can also check out our Patreon, where you can become a patron with a small monthly donation. To get more of Sara Ness and Geof, you can subscribe to their Substacks. So Sara Ness is the Authentic Revolutionary. Geof Krum is Das Geof, spelled DASGEOF. You can also go to their Fight Lab. It's a free Zoom call that's hosted every other Friday from noon to 1:30 Central, where if you are a facilitator in the authentic relating community, you can bring difficult situations, challenges, and workshop them in real time with other folks. It's really, really cool. You can find links to that on their website and on social media as well. And as you know, we have a really nice way of closing. Keep it namaste.